What seems like a perfect day at sea can turn deadly in an instant. From the shocking discovery of a female diver inside a 22-foot great white off Gansby in October 2025, to a heart-pounding orca encounter in Norway's fjords, these 6 stories reveal moments when humans face nature's raw power, where adrenaline surges, survival is uncertain, and the line between thrill and terror vanishes beneath the waves. On October 7, 2025, off the rugged coast of Gansby, South Africa, a group of commercial fishermen battled the churning Atlantic waves as they hauled in what appeared to be a massive, lifeless great white shark, its 22-foot body entangled in the heavy nets. The men, experienced in these waters for decades, had seen their share of enormous predators, but something about this catch immediately set them on edge. The shark's belly was unnaturally swollen, stretched taut against the coarse skin, and a metallic, coppery stench radiated from its gaping mouth and distended body, overwhelming the air and drawing uneasy glances from the crew. The men had pulled countless sharks from these waters before, many measuring far shorter, but none had ever carried such an oppressive weight. Fear mingled with curiosity as they realized this was no ordinary haul, and they summoned marine officials to investigate the gruesome find. By mid-morning, the inspection team arrived, their boots thudding on the wet deck, masks raised against the stench, and their faces set with grim determination. Inside the shark, the reason for its unnatural bulk became horrifyingly clear. The carcass had been carefully opened, and the officials were confronted with a scene both shocking and tragic. The remains of a female diver lay within, her body partially digested, her limbs contorted in ways that betrayed the violence she had endured. Her torn wetsuit clung in shredded fragments, fins ripped and mangled beyond recognition, and her camera and other gear lay scattered and damaged, the lenses shattered and housing cracked. Even seasoned officials, accustomed to the occasional fatal encounter with marine predators, could not conceal the sharp intake of breath at the sight. The diver had been 26-year-old Lucia van der Merwe, a marine photographer from Cape Town, known among her peers for her daring expeditions and meticulous eye for underwater detail. She had set out alone that morning, leaving the small harbor with a waterproof case of equipment, intent on photographing a nearby seal colony, a location she had studied for months. Friends and colleagues described her as fearless, sometimes reckless, but always skilled and careful, attuned to the rhythms of the sea in ways few could match. The news of her disappearance had rippled quickly through the local diving community, sparking frantic searches that turned up nothing until the shark revealed the horrifying truth. Investigators later pieced together a likely sequence of events, noting the possibility that Lucia had been attacked at sea, her injuries fatal before the shark had ingested her. Marks on her limbs, deep and jagged, suggested initial trauma inconsistent with a single shark strike, hinting at either previous predatory encounters or other misadventure in the rough, cold waters. The shark, by then likely near death from old wounds, entanglement, or natural causes, had drifted into the commercial nets, carrying her remains into the hands of those who had been unaware of what they were about to discover. The fishermen, men hardened by years at sea, admitted afterward that the moment they felt the shark's unnatural weight, a chilling thought had crossed their minds. Something human had to be inside. One recalled the strange rigidity of the shark's bulk, the subtle, uneven movement in the nets that did not belong to any fish or standard predator. They had worked together to disentangle the carcass, hands shaking slightly, knowing that the ocean had concealed its secret until forcibly revealed. A reminder of how the line between life and death could vanish beneath the waves without warning. Lucia's equipment, largely destroyed, offered investigators additional clues. Her camera, found near her midsection, still contained fragments of images she had captured that morning, showing schools of fish and playful seals, the light filtering through the water in shafts that seemed almost serene, in stark contrast to the violence that had claimed her life. Bits of her wetsuit and fins suggested the shark had bitten through her gear first, then consumed portions of her body in a rapid, lethal assault, leaving behind only a few recognizable fragments. Each observation added weight to the grim reconstruction of her final hours, painting a picture of both bravery and tragic miscalculation, the relentless unpredictability of the ocean underscoring the peril of solitary diving. The South African marine authorities were quick to document the incident, taking photographs of the shark's interior for forensic purposes, and noting the markings on both the predator and the human remains. Reports suggested that while the shark's behavior was natural for a predator of its size, the presence of human remains in its stomach was exceedingly rare and underscored the vulnerability of divers who ventured alone into the open sea. Forensic experts estimated that Lucia had likely died within minutes of initial contact, her body carried by the currents before the shark became ensnared, preserving her remains in a grotesque but unmistakable testament to the ocean's dangers. Even as the official investigation continued, the fishermen returned to their routines, though none could shake the memory of the day they hauled in a body inside a living predator. It was a story retold along docks and ports, a grim warning for any diver who underestimated the power and reach of the Atlantic's apex hunters. The sea, in its vastness, had hidden both predator and prey, allowing death to drift silently beneath its waves until fate and circumstance combined to reveal the tragic end of a young photographer whose passion for the underwater world had been matched only by the unforgiving reality of life beneath the surface. By the time the shark was removed from the nets and transported for further examination, the story had already spread through Gansby, Cape Town, and beyond, leaving in its wake a mixture of sorrow, fear, and reflection on the ocean's hidden dangers. It was a stark, chilling reminder that no matter the experience, no matter the skill, the sea could claim even the most prepared, leaving only fragments of courage and life tangled in the teeth of its predators. On February 14, 2024, off the jagged coastline of New South Wales, Australia, the afternoon sun sparkled over restless, choppy waves, turning the ocean into a sheet of fractured light that glittered and twisted with every gust of wind. Alex Reynolds, 27, an experienced kiteboarder known for his daring runs along the coastline, skimmed across the swells with practiced precision, the wind tearing at his sail and lifting the board higher with each thrust. He had spent years mastering these waters, reading the waves like a second language, yet even familiarity could not mask the ocean's latent danger, the quiet potential for violence that often lurked just beneath the sunlit surface. Alex's body leaned into the wind, arms straining as he controlled the kite, his muscles coiled like springs, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The water around him glittered deceptively, appearing calm and shallow, yet currents swirled beneath, carrying both fish and predator alike. Without warning, a dark, sleek shape burst upward from the depths with terrifying speed, a streamlined predator moving with the precision and power of a living missile. The short-fin mako, a shark built for lightning-fast strikes, launched itself into the air, jaws wide and eyes dark and focused, slamming into Alex's board with explosive force. The impact shattered the kite lines and flipped him violently into the water, the world spinning as he plunged beneath the sunlit surface. Pain ignited along his right leg almost instantly as the shark clamped down, its teeth tearing through wetsuit and skin in a shock of crushing force. Alex thrashed instinctively, kicking and punching at the water, but the mako shook him violently, testing, ripping, before releasing its grip with a fluid, terrifying efficiency. Heart hammering in his chest, adrenaline coursing in a dizzying rush. He fought to orient himself, lungs burning as he surfaced for air. Foam and splashing erupted around him as the shark circled, a living torpedo slicing through the waves with deadly intent. Its curiosity, its hunger, or perhaps a mix of both, kept it close, each approach precise, testing his movements, gauging his reactions like a predator savoring the hunt. Alex lunged for his kiteboard, now partially afloat and cracked from the initial strike, and clutched it desperately, legs cramping, limbs trembling from the shock and exertion. The mako struck again, a blur of gray and silver, jaws clamping onto his calf this time, teeth sinking in and twisting. A searing, gnawing pain that made him scream in silence against the roaring ocean. He kicked and thrashed, drawing on instinct, on every moment of skill he had ever practiced, until the shark released and vanished beneath the waves as suddenly as it had appeared, leaving him panting, blood streaking the water, and every nerve alive with fear and shock. Despite the injury, Alex refused to succumb. He paddled, kicked, and lunged toward the shoreline with frantic energy, each wave both friend and enemy as it threatened to roll him back into deeper water. His muscles burned, his vision blurred from blood and salt, yet determination held him upright. Around him, the ocean seemed calm again, the sun glinting off the foam in cruel contrast to the terror he had just survived. Finally, with a final, desperate lunge, he reached the sand, collapsing onto the warm grains, breathing ragged, legs trembling, heart hammering with the knowledge that he had escaped death by inches, by luck, and by sheer survival instinct sharpened to its finest edge. Medical responders arrived within minutes, their efficiency cutting through the haze of shock, stabilizing his leg, dressing deep puncture wounds, and offering the first real sense of safety he had felt since the attack. Every movement sent jolts of pain through the damaged calf, yet Alex's mind remained vivid with the memory of the predator, its power and precision etched into his memory. Experts later described shortfin makos as highly curious and opportunistic hunters, capable of explosive bursts and sudden attacks, often investigating floating or moving objects with ferocity. Yet few humans ever survived a direct strike of the kind Alex had endured without catastrophic injury. For Alex, the attack left more than physical scars. Each time he closed his eyes, he replayed the dark shape breaching the surface, the crushing snap of teeth, the explosive power that had thrown him into the water, and the relentless circling that kept him pinned in a suspended state of terror. The ocean had revealed both its beauty and its brutal reality in a single terrifying moment, transforming a sunny afternoon into a near-death experience that would haunt him for years. The encounter demanded respect, a reminder that even those who knew these waters best could never fully anticipate the ocean's predatory reach or the instincts of its most formidable hunters. Friends and fellow kiteboarders later spoke of the event with a mixture of awe and disbelief, recounting Alex's survival with disbelief, tempered by cautionary acknowledgement. He had entered the water seeking exhilaration, the thrill of wind, waves, and speed, and had emerged forever changed, acutely aware that the sea could shift from playground to predator's lair in an instant. Every scar on his leg, every twinge of pain as he moved spoke of a day when survival was measured in seconds, a day when instinct met experience and sheer willpower. By the time Alex returned to the water months later for therapy and slow rehabilitation, he carried with him both fear and respect, understanding that the shortfin mako, a master of speed and predation, had tested him to the edge, leaving behind a lesson in humility, vigilance, and the thin line separating life from tragedy in the sunlit yet treacherous waters of New South Wales. On November 12, 2021, the humid air of Queensland's northern coast pressed heavily against the skin, thick with the scent of wet earth and salt, as the swollen river estuary reflected the fading orange light of late afternoon. Ethan Roberts, 29, an experienced kayaker and angler, navigated the small motorboat with careful precision through the muddy, brackish waters, accompanied by his longtime friends Nina Patel, 26, a biologist with a steady hand and keen eye, and Omar Khan, 28, a local fisherman familiar with every bend and hidden channel of the river. Recent rains had stirred the estuary, sending silt, cattle runoff, and schools of fish upstream, conditions that made the waters a feeding ground for bull sharks, predators both territorial and opportunistic, waiting silently beneath the dark, opaque surface. The three friends moved slowly, Ethan leaning over the side to free a stuck fishing line tangled in a submerged root while joking lightly with Nina and Omar, the kind of casual banter that betrayed their confidence and sense of safety in waters they thought they knew. The boat rocked gently in the current, each wave a minor disturbance, each ripple masking the tension lurking below. For decades, locals had warned that bull sharks patrolled estuaries like this one, their presence silent until violence erupted without warning. Without time to react, the water beneath Ethan's legs exploded in a sudden surge. A massive shadow, sleek and muscular, hurtled upward, jaws opening in a terrifying arc, teeth gleaming like sharpened shards against the sunlit murk. The predator, a bull shark of extraordinary size, latched onto Ethan's thigh with unimaginable force. Pain erupted immediately, hot and searing, as the shark shook him violently, pulling with a strength that bent the small boat and tore at his leg with ruthless precision. Nina screamed, a sharp, piercing sound that cut through the humid air, while Omar scrambled to push the predator away, hands slapping at the water that moved with the shark's power, ineffective against the creature's sheer force. The boat pitched violently, teetering with each thrash of the shark, and Ethan was dragged into the murky depths, his body twisting against the current. the water suddenly opaque with foam and blood. Panic surged through Nina and Omar as they watched, helpless and terrified, the predator circling with a deliberate, measured intelligence, testing its prey in a sudden, lethal dance. Ethan kicked and thrashed, lungs burning, heart hammering, but the shark's grip was unyielding. Moments stretched into what felt like an eternity as his vision blurred and the taste of salt and iron filled his mouth. Then, as abruptly as it had seized him, the shark released Ethan, disappearing into the swirling water with terrifying speed, leaving him bleeding and barely conscious, gasping for air, body trembling from shock and the violent trauma inflicted on his leg. Nina and Omar pulled him back into the boat, lifting him against the sides with frantic effort. But it was immediately clear that the injury was catastrophic. Blood poured freely, dark and unstoppable, mixing with the river water as the boat rocked on the restless estuary, every second a race against time. Despite Omar's experience and Nina's calm attempts to stem the bleeding, Ethan's strength faltered. His eyes, wide with pain and disbelief, searched their faces for reassurance, for some indication that he would survive, but the reality was undeniable. Within minutes he lost consciousness, and when they finally reached the nearest clearing along the riverbank, the small group could do nothing to reverse the damage. Ethan Roberts had succumbed to blood loss before medical help could arrive, his body carried from life by a single instantaneous strike from one of the estuary's deadliest predators. Local authorities later described bull sharks in estuarine environments as highly territorial, capable of sudden devastating strikes, and opportunistic in their hunting patterns, often investigating disturbances on the surface with lethal precision. The estuary, familiar to Omar and studied by Nina and Ethan, had transformed in moments from a placid, familiar setting into a lethal hunting ground, illustrating how quickly routine and confidence could be shattered by nature's raw power. Investigators noted the efficiency of the attack, the speed at which the predator had chosen, struck and retreated, leaving behind only destruction and grief, a stark reminder of the thin line between security and catastrophe in predator-inhabited waters. Friends and locals recounted the event in disbelief, speaking of the sudden violence with a mixture of sorrow and fear, reflecting on how someone so experienced, so careful, could fall victim within seconds. The river, often a place of recreation and sustenance, had demonstrated its darker truth. Beneath the surface, survival depended not only on skill and knowledge, but on timing, chance, and the uncontrollable impulses of a predator perfectly adapted to its environment. For Nina and Omar, the loss was both immediate and enduring, the estuary forever marked in memory by the scene of the attack, the sudden violence, the panic and helplessness that had defined the final moments of a friend who had trusted these waters. Every detail, from the way the shark had emerged to the pitch of the boat as it rocked violently, to the helpless grasping at air and water, remained etched in their minds, a vivid testament to the danger hidden in even familiar settings. The story of the estuary hunt became a somber lesson in local circles, a warning that even the most careful observers of nature could be caught unaware. It reminded all who heard it that rivers and estuaries, flowing with life, food and movement, also carried the potential for sudden death, and that bull sharks, territorial and predatory, could turn the quiet waters of a familiar estuary into a scene of instant tragedy without warning or mercy. By nightfall, the estuary had returned to its deceptive calm, the water glowing faintly under the rising moon. Yet the memory of the attack lingered like a shadow, a warning to anyone who might underestimate the quiet danger of the predatory world beneath the water's surface. On March 21, 2025, off the rugged coast of Gansbai, South Africa, the morning sun pierced through a sky brushed with wisps of cloud, casting sharp rays across the crystalline blue of the Atlantic. The water appeared calm, deceptively serene, yet beneath its surface churned a world of predators, currents, and hidden danger. Each element conspired to make the ocean both beautiful and merciless. Ella Morgan, 25, a rising marine photographer with a reputation for capturing the most intimate and daring underwater moments, descended into the steel confines of a shark cage, camera poised and breathing slow and deliberate, her body tense with anticipation. She had spent years studying sharks, learning their patterns, rhythms, and subtle behaviors, yet nothing could fully prepare her for the raw power she was about to face. The cage swung gently beneath the boat, suspended by thick cables, its bars cold against her palms as she steadied the camera. Around her, the water shimmered, clear enough to see the occasional school of fish glinting like silver against the blue, and the small shafts of sunlight that cut through the depths in fleeting, luminous patterns. Every sense heightened. Ella felt the latent tension in the water, the subtle vibrations and currents that hinted at life moving silently below. It was only moments later that she realized she was not alone. A shadow, immense and impossibly fast, rose from the deep with patience and precision. A massive great white gliding just beyond the cage, its dark form an unmistakable silhouette against the filtered sunlight. The predator moved deliberately, circling slowly, almost calculatingly, as if it were testing the strange human shapes contained within the metal bars, gauging their reactions while measuring its own strength. Ella's heart hammered, a mix of fear and awe driving her focus. Camera aimed but not in control of the scene unfolding around her, the water alive with the potential for sudden violence. Without warning, the shark lunged upward, striking the side of the cage with a deafening thud that reverberated through the metal and sent shockwaves across the water. The cage twisted violently on its cables, and Ella slammed against the bars, scraping her shoulder and forearm, the sting sharp and immediate against her skin. The camera jostled in her hands as the predator slammed again, teeth snapping mere inches from her lens, water and bubbles erupting violently around her as the great white tested the boundaries, the strange human contraption offering both protection and confinement against the raw force it projected. The predator circled relentlessly, brushing against the cage with its snout, thudding against the reinforced steel, shaking it with deliberate patience. It seemed to examine every angle, calculating each movement, teasing and testing, aware of the humans inside and yet bound by an instinct that demanded caution. Splashes erupted around her, the water churning in foam and turbulence, as the crew above pounded on the metal, shouted warnings, and tried to assert control over a situation that was, in truth, largely beyond their influence. Each movement of the shark was precise, every approach measured, forcing Ella to adapt, to anticipate, and to remain as still and deliberate as possible while capturing the harrowing encounter through her lens. Time seemed to stretch unnaturally, the minutes elongating into an eternity as the predator stalked, deliberate yet cautious, circling and pressing against the cage with a power that reminded Ella how fragile human constructs were in the face of nature's apex hunters. She could feel every vibration in the steel through her palms, hear the groan of metal as teeth scraped bars, and sense the weight of the water pressing against her from every direction, alive with energy and menace. Her body trembled from a mix of fear, adrenaline, and the sheer awe of facing such raw, elemental force so directly, suspended in a world that was simultaneously beautiful and utterly indifferent to human vulnerability. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the shark shifted, a subtle change in the current carrying it downward and backward, retreating with deliberate slowness into the deep, leaving only swirling foam and bubbles in its wake. The cage rocked gently, water rippling across its bars, and Ella exhaled in a long, shuddering release, body trembling, heart pounding, and adrenaline still roaring through her veins. She surfaced slowly, breaking through the sparkling surface of the ocean, gasping for air, muscles tense and quivering, and her gaze swept the water where the predator had vanished, a mix of relief and disbelief settling over her. The crew hauled the cage aboard, voices hushed but urgent, their eyes reflecting the same combination of fear and respect that had settled over Ella. She remained silent for a long moment, processing the encounter, understanding that she had survived not because of luck alone, but because of careful preparation, respect for the predator's power, and the fragile barrier of steel that had kept her alive. The great white, patient, powerful, and deliberate, had demonstrated the delicate balance between curiosity, instinct, and sheer predatory force, leaving a lasting impression that would shape her perception of the ocean forever. By the time the boat reached the safety of the harbor, the event had already begun to etch itself into memory as a defining encounter, a moment where human skill, courage, and understanding met the unrelenting power of one of the sea's most formidable hunters. For Ella Morgan, March 21, 2025, would remain unforgettable, a reminder of how quickly admiration can shift to terror, and how the ocean, in all its beauty, can reveal the raw, primal force that lies beneath its glittering surface. Even as she dried and wrapped herself against the sea breeze, camera still clutched, she understood something profoundly simple and terrifying: that the predator she had faced was neither malicious nor unjust, only a living force following instincts honed over millennia, and that her survival had depended entirely on respect, awareness, and the delicate barrier that separated human fragility from the overwhelming strength of the natural world. On April 16, 2022, in a sun-drenched remote lagoon off the coast of Fiji, the water shimmered in shades of turquoise and emerald, the sunlight filtering through the shallow coral reefs in patterns that danced and flickered with every ripple. Liam Carter, 28, an adventurous stand-up paddleboarder with years of experience in tropical waters, led the small group of friends across the glassy surface. Beside him, Sophia Reyes, 26, a marine biologist with an affinity for reefs and small creatures, glided effortlessly on her board, while Marcus Liu, 27, a photographer with a penchant for capturing moments of raw energy, trailed with careful observation. Tessa Bennett, 25, a travel writer documenting the expedition, followed last, her eyes scanning the water and sky, camera strapped to her chest, unaware of the predator stalking the depths below. The lagoon was idyllic, the shallow coral teeming with small fish, colorful in their flickering movements, while tiny rays of light cut through the water, illuminating the reef like an underwater cathedral. Liam, confident and daring, paddled ahead toward a deeper channel, where schools of baitfish shimmered in tight, flashing formations, an irresistible signal to any predator in the vicinity. The friends laughed lightly, the sound ringing across the calm water, their movement synchronized with the gentle swell of the tide, unaware of the danger lurking just beneath the surface. Unseen, a tiger shark, massive and muscular, patrolled the deeper waters, its body streamlined and built for explosive bursts of speed. Drawn by the concentration of prey, the predator moved with deliberate caution, circling beneath the sunlit ripples, calculating the timing, gauging the motion of the human figures above. In moments, the shark became a living shadow beneath the water, an unseen force gathering energy, muscles coiling for the strike that would transform the playful afternoon into a scene of terror. Without warning, the tiger shark lunged upward, striking with the precision and power honed by evolution over millennia. Its jaws clamped onto Liam's leg with brutal force, tearing through wetsuit and muscle, pain exploding instantly as he cried out and thrashed, desperately attempting to free himself. The water erupted in foam and chaos, his paddleboard flipping violently as he struggled against the immense strength of the predator. The lagoon, moments before calm and inviting, became a vortex of panic, splashes, and blood, the vivid turquoise streaked with crimson as adrenaline surged through every nerve. Sophia and Marcus scrambled to assist, splashing frantically and attempting to distract the shark with whatever movement they could muster, kicking at the water, grasping at anything within reach to draw its attention away from Liam. Tessa waved desperately toward the nearby guides stationed along the shore, her heart hammering as she realized the speed and ferocity of the attack left little room for intervention. Every second stretched, elongated by the sheer terror of the moment, and despite the friends' frantic efforts, the shark's strength and experience proved overwhelming. Liam's struggles grew weaker with each thrash, his body battered, blood loss immediate, as the predator delivered a swift, lethal series of bites before finally retreating into the deeper shadows of the channel. By the time rescue crews arrived, the lagoon had returned to an eerie calm, its surface deceptively serene, with sunlight glinting off ripples streaked in red. Marcus and Sophia clutched each other, hearts racing, faces pale as the realization of the day's horror settled fully upon them. Tessa, trembling, camera dangling uselessly against her chest, could only stare at the water where moments before her friend had fought for life against one of the ocean's most efficient predators. The guides, trained for emergencies yet visibly shaken, confirmed the attack was instantaneous and fatal, leaving Liam's body claimed by the relentless precision of the tiger shark and carried by the currents in the channel below. For the survivors, the lagoon's beauty became inseparable from its danger. The vibrant coral and sparkling fish, once sources of joy and fascination, now served as reminders of the razor-thin line separating adventure from tragedy. Investigators later noted that tiger sharks, especially in warm, prey-rich waters, are highly opportunistic hunters, capable of explosive strikes, patient observation, and rapid retreat. The shallow lagoon, seemingly safe and idyllic, had become a hunting ground in the predator's eyes, and the friends had witnessed the lethal efficiency of a creature perfectly adapted to its environment. Even after they returned to shore, the sounds, sights, and sensations of the attack lingered vividly in memory. The sudden force of the shark, the thrashing of Liam's body in the water, the red streaks across turquoise currents, and the chaotic splashes of desperate intervention haunted every thought, creating an indelible imprint of fear, grief, and helplessness. The adrenaline that had coursed through each of them began to fade, leaving shock, sorrow, and the piercing realization that even the most careful, experienced adventurers could be blindsided by nature's raw power. In the weeks following the attack, the story spread among locals and tourists alike, a sobering reminder that even the most idyllic settings carry hidden threats. The lagoon, with its calm surface and vibrant reef life, had been transformed in a matter of seconds into a scene of life and death, an environment where one moment of curiosity or daring could trigger a predator's instinct, leaving no opportunity for negotiation or reprieve. For Marcus, Sophia, and Tessa, the memory of that day would remain etched permanently in their minds, a day of vivid sunlight and sudden horror, where joy and terror collided in the turquoise waters of a remote Fijian lagoon. For anyone who witnessed or learned of the attack, it became a lesson in respect for the ocean and its inhabitants, a chilling account of how a single predator could turn beauty into danger, and a reminder that the line between life and death in such settings is not measured in minutes or hours, but in a heartbeat, a motion, a single explosive strike from a creature evolved for hunting in its watery domain. On August 19, 2025, the icy waters of northern Norway's fjords glimmered beneath a pale summer sun, the cliffs rising like sheer walls of stone, carved by centuries of glacial movement, streaked with hardy greenery clinging to the jagged rock. A luxury catamaran glided smoothly across the fjord, carrying a group of tourists eager to witness the region's famed wildlife, cameras and phones raised to capture breaching orcas, and the dramatic landscape that stretched to the horizon. Among them was Jonas Berglund, 32, a travel photographer from Oslo, known for his daring shots and meticulous eye for detail, who leaned over the railing intent on framing the perfect image of a pod of orcas slicing through the waves below. The fjord, serene and almost hypnotic in its beauty, seemed to hold its breath as Jonas adjusted his camera, the metal railing cold beneath his hands, oblivious to the fragile boundary between observation and danger. The catamaran's deck, polished and slick with occasional spray, offered little margin for error, and in a sudden, fleeting moment his balance shifted. He overreached, grasping for a better angle, and the water rushed up to meet him, plunging him headfirst into the frigid fjord with a shock that stole his breath and sent his limbs into panicked flails. Screams from fellow passengers echoed across the deck, mingling with the slap of water against the hull, and the captain's voice rang out sharply, commanding calm, though urgency threaded every word. Below the surface, the orca pod that had been breaching and gliding gracefully through the fjord responded almost immediately to the intrusion. A massive male, sleek and muscular, surfaced nearby, its black and white form a blur of motion against the gray-green water. The animal circled with astonishing speed, moving with a fluid grace that seemed effortless yet deliberate, nudging Jonas with its snout in a pattern that was both insistent and controlled. Each nudge propelled him through the icy waves, disorienting him and testing his endurance, the predator's strength and precision leaving no room for error or hesitation. Above, the crew scrambled to deploy life rings and ropes, their hands slippery from spray, shouting instructions that competed with the passengers' panicked cries. The water erupted around Jonas as other members of the pod slapped their tails and breached, sending cascading sheets of icy water over the deck and into the faces of those who had rushed forward to watch. Each breach reverberated through the boat, a reminder of the raw force contained within the orcas' muscular bodies, their movements simultaneously mesmerizing and terrifying in their precision. Jonas fought to keep his head above water, lungs burning, arms shaking, eyes wide as he realized how quickly the tranquil fjord had transformed into a zone of unpredictable power. The orcas circled him relentlessly, nudging, bumping, and herding him toward the floating life rings, seemingly aware of the human's fragile form while testing limits with a measured deliberateness. Jonas's body grew numb from the cold, each kick and paddle more difficult than the last. Yet instinct and sheer survival reflex pushed him onward. His mind raced with disbelief and fear as he realized how close he had come to being overpowered, the sleek predators manipulating his movements with ease, their intelligence evident in every motion, every subtle touch, and every calculated approach. Time seemed suspended, each second stretching as he struggled to comprehend the unnatural combination of terror and awe, of being simultaneously threatened and guided by creatures whose power and awareness far exceeded his own. The pod's behaviors, slaps of tails, coordinated breaches, and nudges against Jonas's body, were not malicious in a traditional sense, but the effect was undeniable. Survival depended entirely on endurance, quick thinking, and the crew's timely intervention. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Jonas managed to grasp a life ring thrown by a crew member, clutching it with desperate determination as he was slowly pulled toward the catamaran. Hands reached down, gripping his arms and lifting him aboard, the deck slippery beneath their feet as Jonas collapsed, shivering uncontrollably, his entire body trembling from cold, shock, and adrenaline. The orcas, sensing the conclusion of the encounter, drifted back into deeper waters, their dorsal fins slicing through the surface before disappearing entirely into the fjord's reflective depths, leaving only ripples and foam behind. Once aboard, Jonas lay on the deck, wrapped in blankets, gasping in sharp, ragged breaths, heart still hammering from the sudden, violent exertion. Fellow passengers clustered nearby, faces pale, some in silence, others still shaking from adrenaline, the enormity of the near disaster settling over them. The fjord, which moments before had seemed a tranquil paradise, had revealed its raw, predatory undercurrent, demonstrating that even in moments of observation, humans were fragile interlopers in a domain ruled by immense, intelligent creatures. Experts later described the incident as curiosity-driven interaction, a behavior in which orcas investigate, herd, and nudge unfamiliar objects or beings in their environment. To those on board, however, it had felt visceral, personal, and terrifying. A confrontation with raw strength that was impossible to ignore. Jonas, now safe, carried with him a profound awareness of the fjord's dual nature, breathtaking beauty intertwined with lethal capability, mirrored perfectly in the sleek, powerful orcas whose curiosity had guided the encounter and dictated its tension. Even after the catamaran resumed its slow glide through the fjord, the passengers remained silent, absorbing the lingering tension, the memory of cold water, surging adrenaline, and overwhelming power. The experience would be recounted repeatedly, a story of survival, awe, and respect, a vivid reminder that wildlife, no matter how captivating, operates on instincts far removed from human expectation. Jonas particularly felt the weight of the encounter, understanding that survival had required not just luck, but awareness, timing, and the fragile barrier between human vulnerability and nature's apex forces. In the weeks that followed, every glance at the fjord reminded him of that day, of the sound of splashing, the feel of icy water, the nudges of enormous snouts, and the calculated coordination of the pod as they circled, pushed, and observed. The incident transformed his perspective, merging fear with respect, fascination with caution, creating a vivid mental imprint of that day when serene beauty shifted in an instant into a near-fatal encounter with the most powerful and intelligent of marine predators. For anyone who had been present or who later learned of the attack, it became a lesson in humility, in respect for the ocean and its inhabitants, and a chilling demonstration of the fine line between observation and vulnerability. In mere seconds, the fjord had revealed that even in the midst of beauty, power and unpredictability were always present, and that curiosity, intelligence, and raw strength could combine in ways that left human fragility exposed in the most profound and unforgettable manner.